Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name's Matthew, and just for today, a grateful recovered member of Cocaine Anonymous. Thanks to the committee for putting the meeting on, everyone that's turned up, everyone online. Um, and straight off the bat, right, I introduced myself as a recovered addict. That is a long stretch away from cured. So let's not get the book describes it as restless, irritable, and discontent, but also selfish and self-centered, and that's how I lived my life. From my earliest memories, growing up with a half brother and sister, um, selfish to the core. Anything they wanted, I wanted, and when I got it, it was never good enough. And I lived my life that way. And look, the longer I stay in the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous, the worse my childhood seems. But the honest truth is, I didn't have a bad childhood. I had my mum and dad were around. They struggled and scrimped and scraped to give me everything that I could ever need, not want, but need. My dad worked in a school, so he was around after school. My mum then worked nights. She went back and retrained so she could get a bigger pay from nursing. And I watched all of this unfold in a loving family home, right? So I know now that consequence and circumstance is not why I'm here. Because if consequences were enough, I would have stopped years ago, right? But I'm not going to bore you with my childhood, but I picked up drinking drugs really young. I was about 12. Um, and I absolutely loved the effects produced. I did. I can't sit here and say I hate drugs because I wouldn't be sat here, right, in a meeting of Cocaine Anonymous if I hated drugs. I absolutely loved the effects produced. And I just smashed. To be honest, right, I just smashed my life to pieces. Like I didn't mean to. I don't know how it happened. What started off fun, then became fun with consequences now and again. Then it became consequences, and then even with the consequences, it didn't stop me drinking and using. So July 2020, I ended up in a treatment center. Um, I'd been kicked out for like the 40th time that year. Mrs. has had enough. The kids had had enough. All of this whole situation. And then there's me saying my favorite word, and that was sorry, over and over and over again. And I ended up back at my mum's, as every gangster does when the loved ones have had enough. And I remember thinking, right, now I can drink and use the way that I could drink and use 15 years ago without impunity, without punishment, because my mum's never there. She's at work. After my dad died, she doesn't even eat at home anymore. She'd prefer to have a flipping meal deal out than sit at home on her own, right? And I was showing no remorse or anything like that because I was just locking myself in my old bedroom. So she'd finally had enough, and I ended up in a treatment center. And for anyone new, it isn't a qualification that you have to go to a treatment center for Cocaine Anonymous. It's not. This is just my story, and I don't speak for Cocaine Anonymous. I'm not a podium speaker. I don't just have one regurgitated main share. But I remember feeling utterly hopeless, and not as hopeless as I'd previously felt. I felt a little bit better, but I was still very hopeless. And all that kept going around in my head is just get another one. Next time will be different. Just go and get another one. Next time will be different. And the remarkable thing was the next one was no fucking different than the 10 fucking before. But all that kept happening is a little piece of me would leave. And that's the only way I could describe it. Every time I did another one and another one and another one, whether that's a drink or drug, or messaging women or, obsessing on gambling websites, it didn't matter. It was anything I could do to change the way that I feel. And every time I did it, it took a little bit more of me away. And when I went into treatment, I'm humble enough to say I was removed from society. The reality set in. The drink and drugs wore off, and I was left with me. And me left with me is a scary place because I didn't realize how fearful I am as a person. You know, and that very first night I wet the bed. That's how desperate it got. And I remember going the next day and I was like, fuck, like I can't, you know, these people are going to think less of me. And that's a mad concept when you're in a treatment center with 30 other people that have been removed from society. And I'm still thinking, I don't want to feel less than. I still want to be king of the crackheads. And that's me all over. You know, I would be lying in the gutter looking down on people. So I had this grandiose idea of what my life was, and you know, and it revolved around the job, the cars, the clothes, the women, all of that stuff. But I had a missus and kids that I was quite happy to ignore to go out and do what I was doing. And yeah, the treatment said it was a wake-up call because, and this is the kicker, right? The thing that I got out of treatment was a big book, and they're like 13 quid in a meeting. Do you know what I mean? And but what it had actually done is it had piqued my interest, because I went into treatment this bullshit, arrogant Jack the Lad. Like I protested to my mum, I can't go there unless I've got a new pair of trainers. I can't rock up there, and the only shoes I've got are my fucking work boots. Like I can't do that. It's like July. It's like fucking 30 degrees outside. But 2 weeks ago, I was happy walking around in them fucking stinky DeWalt boots, right? But because I'm now going to treatment, I have to have a fresh pair of trainers. So she obliged anyway. And I remember going there, and first night, reality set in, wet the bed. Next day, there's a chapter, it's called Gutter Bravado. And the feeling that I had inside was like I'd forgotten about everything else that had gone on that had brought me into the treatment center, and now I just want to be the best, whatever that looked like. You know, I want to be the funniest. I think all the girls fancy me. I think all the boys want to be me. You know, and I was just whirling around in this arrogant fucking look at me, and I got swiftly tore down. They did a thing called process group where you'd sit in a circle, and the geezer that run it would just rip into every single person there. And I remember walking out of there thinking, oh, that geezer's a see you next Tuesday. But where am I going? I'm going back to my room. I'm going to cry. I'm going to get upset. I'm going to fucking stamp and kick my feet like a fucking child. But the reality is, for the first time in my life, I admitted that I am an addict. My life is unmanageable. I'm definitely powerless. So in the book, right, it goes through the 12 steps, but step one isn't something that is described in great detail in the book, because a step one, and for me, my step one is something that I had to get from my experience of trying to do life like everyone else, or what I thought everyone else was doing. So my step one was firmly rooted in, when I put one of anything, whether that's drink, drugs, gambling, women, fucking I'll obsess about trainers and fucking haircuts and tattoos and all of this stuff. Whenever I put that stuff in first place, I will always come last. So for the first time, I admitted I'm powerless in my life as unmanageable. And going through it with sponsees right now, they're like, well, I don't know. I don't think I'm powerless. I said, well, you probably don't need fucking Cocaine Anonymous then. You might be able to drink and use successfully. Please let me know how you get on. But for me, you know, my life was desperate. And the last time that I drank and used, it wasn't even like the heyday, because my head will always go back on euphoric recall and remember the good times and going to after parties in Premier Inns and staying up for 3 days and, you know, winning $1,000 on fucking gambling site, you know, all of this mad stuff. It doesn't take me to the last time. Now, the last time I was so fucking paranoid, I called the police because I thought someone was in my flat. And when they nearly sectioned me, but they actually released me as a duty of care, they took me to my mum, who was at work. So now I'm sitting in a hospital like this, thinking I'm going to die. But at least if I die, I'm in the right place. And then when I went home, I continued to drink and use, and I called the fire brigade on myself, because all my hairs were standing up, and I thought I was bursting into flames. I was going to spontaneously combust into flames, right? So I've called 2 of the 3 emergency services, and the only one I didn't call is the one that could probably fucking help me. So this is the delusion that I suffer with, right? I'll call everyone else. I'll do everything else. I tried everything else, so I didn't have to sit in a room of Cocaine Anonymous. And when I came out of treatment, I remember thinking on the way home, because my missus wouldn't come and get me, rightly so. My mum was at work, and the guy was like, look, if you give us 100 quid, we'll drop you home. So I was like, sweet. It was like far from my house. Anyway, so my mum's paid the money because I have none. And he's dropped me home. And I remember thinking to myself in the minibus, it was like a flipping sunshine bus, like loads of windows. I'm sitting there all paranoid because, again, I'm left with me. And I've pulled up at the flats, the same block of flats that I lived in, you know, all of that stuff. Neighbours haven't changed. Realistically, I haven't changed. And I remember thinking in the van, let me just knock on his door, because I live on the 3rd floor, so I had to go up 2 flights of stairs. Let me just knock on his door. He's going to wonder where I've been for a month. I'm going to show him that I look really well, how well I've done in treatment, because they took a picture of me with a little hat on, with a Polaroid. It went up on a meeting board. Fixed. That's what I thought, right? I've done the treatment, done 28 days. I've got a clean bloodstream, fixed. Knocked on his door. And everything that my head told me went out of the window. And the only words that came out were, what have you got for me? So now I've realized that I never had a problem with drink and drugs in the first place. Now I know the problem is me and my thinking, because every time, this is a real head blown moment, right? Every time I've called it on when I'm sober, I'm sober. And that's the mad thing. So I don't have a drink and drug problem. I've got a problem with how I react to life. So anyway, he's answered the door. I said, what have you got for me? Cut a long story short, can't even call it a relapse because there'd been no sufficient change. The only thing I'd changed in 28 days was my pants. And I just went straight back to square one. And again, it was the most pitiful thing I've ever done in my life, because there was more paracetamol in it than anything else. So all it actually did was get rid of a headache I didn't have. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what are you doing? And to any Italians, right, it's like sacrilege. But have you ever snapped pasta to get it in the pan so it cooks a little bit quicker? You ain't got that stiff bit hanging out the top. That's how it felt in my chest. That's the only way to describe this feeling of a complete surrender and a spiritual change. From that moment, that was my first spiritual experience. And that sounds mad if you're new in the room or online, you know, how it was explained to me, a spiritual experience, right? A complete psychic change. It's like I've been brainwashed. My very first sponsor, I said to him, it's like I've been brainwashed. And he said, good, your brain needed a good fucking wash. And that's how I felt. You know, something in me had been lit. This fire started burning. With treatment, we had to attend meetings. So, you know, we'd stumbled onto this Friday meeting. I'd got a guy's number. He's like, call me at 7 a.m. I never called him at 7 a.m. that week, because why would I? It's a bit steep, right? Call me at 7 a.m. Oh, yeah, okay. Fuck off. And I remember looking at my phone, and it was saved under his name, which I'm not going to break for anonymity, and I stood there. I stood there for about 20 minutes just looking at it, too scared to call it. After that 20 minutes, I just bit the bullet, and I was like, I'm thinking the whole time, I can't go back to what I was doing. What I'm doing is shit. I can't keep hurting people. I'm dying inside. My option is I do this stuff, or that nylon rope that's been hanging around in my Amazon basket for the last 6 weeks might actually get purchased today. And I gave him a call, and bless him, he started doing this weird prayer thing down the phone to me. And it was like, my creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. I pray that you know. And I'm thinking, what's this guy on? He must still be on drugs. But little did I know, he was trying to invoke a change in me. And I started calling it. He said, call me. He gave me some simple directions. They weren't suggestions, because if someone suggests something to me, I'm not going to do it because I'm bone idle and lazy. He directed me to do these simple things. And he said, call me at 7 a.m., do some prayers, do some meditation. I know I can guess you're lazy from how you're talking. So I'm going to send you some set prayers. So he sent me the 3, 7, and 11 prayer. And then he was like, you can do a personal prayer. And again, I'm lazy, so I'll do the Lord's Prayer, because we used to do that every fucking assembly in school, and I know that shit off by heart, right? Because I'm lazy like that. And so I started doing this stuff, and the next day rolled around, 7 a.m., called him, and again, this is just my experience. Called him, didn't answer. So, fair enough, must be busy. Carried on doing my daily stuff, prayer, meditation, gratitude list, sent that over, reached out to a couple of people during the day, got on with my day. I wasn't working at the time, so I got on an afternoon meeting, and I got on the evening meeting as well. And then the next day clicked around, and I called him at 7 a.m. and he didn't answer. And this went on for 7 days. And the whole time, this resentment's building in my head. Like, how dare he? Doesn't he know who I am? I'm fucked. I'm dying. He's going to kill me. All of this stuff. And on the 7th day, I rang him at 7 a.m. and my head wanted to say, who the fuck are you? Why have you done this to me for the last 7 days? And he answered and he said, well done. You've showed some willingness. I'll get you added to the gratitude group. And I went, yeah, thanks. So straight away, like these daily directions that I was set out in the beginning, they've kept me in good stead, because it kept me accountable. And through my own experience with my step 1, I was willing. And that's what he was looking for, to see if I was willing. And we embarked on the steps pretty quickly. I highlighted the book within, I think, 24 hours, because I'm a proper keno when it's something that I want. And highlighted the book within 24 hours. So that was Saturday. The Monday after work, we got into the book, or when he finished work, we got into the book. And I went through the 12 steps, and I had an experience, right? And so it was completely different, a completely different way than this time that I've gone through the work. And I, to be honest, I didn't really understand. I was just caught up in this whirlwind of, right, that's step 1, and no, we've done that. That's step 2, and I never really knew where I was in the book. I didn't really know. I'm dyslexic and I get bored really easily. So he's talking to me, but we're reading full chapters. And halfway through the chapter, I'm thinking, fuck, like, what am I having for lunch? I've seen a new pair of trainers on JD. And my head's just taken over. And my first year in recovery was a whirlwind. I went through the 12 steps. I had a spiritual awakening. I stopped obsessing about drinking, using, gambling, women, all of this mad stuff. And I pushed myself in front of meetings, right? Now, if meetings were enough to keep me sober, I wouldn't need to do the 12 steps. I'd just turn up to the meetings, sit there with my camera off, or come to a face-to-face and sit here like this, because that's like the equivalent, right? You can't see me. But to be honest, the meetings that I was doing, I was watching a lot of happy, well people, right? I had all 7 of their meetings were my home groups. I attended them every week for the first 2 years of my sobriety. The Saturday meeting was a particular favorite of mine, because where else would you want to be on a Saturday night than sitting on a Zoom meeting in your bedroom? Do you know what I mean? But the group of people, so this is about fellowship now, a group of people, and they're all talking about the same thing, and they're all turning up week after week. The meetings getting run, the readings are getting done, all of this stuff. And I remember thinking, wow, like this lot, like they're on it, like they're about this life. And I got to a year clean and sober, and these suicidal thoughts kept coming back, like recurring thoughts of, you're quite far removed from the problem of the drink and drugs, but you're still a dickhead. So why don't you just go and hang yourself? And they kept coming thick and fast. And I wasn't putting any extra action into my program. I was still doing the basics, the bare minimum. And I remember one of the guys that I shared all the home groups with, he was active. I was talking to at least 13 people he was sponsoring. He had 7 service commitments. When he wasn't doing that, he was doing flyers, promotional stuff. And I just remember thinking, like, And don't get me wrong, it wasn't my sponsor's fault. My first sponsor, it was me. Lack of action. That's what's going to kill me. It says half measures avail us nothing in the book. And that's where I was at, right? And I had two choices. I either drift off into the background and just be one of these people that used to be around and I'm not here anymore and probably go back to drinking and using, or I asked this man to sponsor me and I start getting busy with this stuff. And I picked the second choice. And I would love to say it was straight off my own back, but I was driving and we were talking because, you know, we were fellows at the time and I called him, and to be honest, he was miserable most of the time, but it stopped me thinking about me, right? And I'm driving, I'm like, well, I could actually do with like getting a new sponsor, having a new experience. And he went, well, what's fucking wrong with the old one? Like, it's probably you. And I was like, oh, would you sponsor me? He's like, no, like banter. Straight off the bat, he went, nah, you seem like too much aggro, too much hard work. And I was like, oh, fair enough. And I put the phone down, and I'm a big believer in certain things happen in life and things come up in life and they can't be ignored, right? And I'm driving, I love music, and I'm you know, wise before my time, and I listen to Magic because I love all that shit. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't listen to new music. And George Michael, Faith came on the radio. Faith. And I was like, fuck, I'm running back. I'm like, no, you've actually got to sponsor me. And he said, fine, I'll do it, but ring your sponsor, thank him for the experience, and we'll get cracking. And from that day to today, it's only ever been about the actions. I went back through the 12 steps. I continue to have spiritual awakenings or complete psychic changes because the person that sat here even this time last year is not the same person. You know, I faced homelessness in active addiction. I faced homelessness in recovery. You know, we got slapped with a Section 21 eviction order this time last year. It was either bailiffs coming to my door on Christmas Eve or I find somewhere else to live. And for me, I've lent on my program. I've sponsored more people. I've done more inventory. I've implemented more positive actions into my life. I've attended more meetings. I've got myself out there. You know, I started attending a face-to-face meeting. It didn't really go down very well for me. And that's just my experience with that particular meeting, because I was the only person out of 35 people that introduced themselves as a recovered addict. And for me, in chapter 7, working with others, I'm thinking to myself, are we even reading the same fucking book? Because I am to introduce myself as a recovered member, and I'm here to be helpful, right? It says it in the book, it's very clear. And it goes back to what I said in the beginning, recovered, not cured. Keep that one straight. But I still attended that fucking meeting every week, and I wasn't getting on with it. And do you know what I did? I threw myself at it, and I got a fucking literature commitment, and it was the best thing I ever did. So my head's telling me you're not getting on with it. Look at this internal monologue of shit that I have constantly, and because of the way I've been sponsored and continue to remain willing and teachable and sponsorable, I got a literature service commitment for a year. It got me talking to everyone. It got me talking to newcomers, you know, and it was the best thing that ever happened for my recovery. So having gone through the 12 steps, continuing to be of service, helping other people, and being of service to Cocaine Anonymous has kept me in good stead. You know, and yesterday I hit a milestone that I never even thought was possible. And for me, it's been a bit of a roller coaster of emotions for the last week, right? Because I hear it a lot. We only have today, yada, yada, yada. There's a 24-hour program, all of that stuff. But from a absolute scumbag that you wouldn't have trusted to make you a ham sandwich ever, because you couldn't trust that I'd wash my hands anyway, to where I sit today is a completely different person. And that alone has blown my mind. You know, today, I came into recovery, right? A complete atheist. I didn't believe. Religion was forced down my neck. As a child, I repelled from it. Faith is something that I've grown into very slowly. In the beginning, it was nature. My first sponsor said, if I gave you all the wood in the world, can you make me a tree? No? Okay. So if I gave you a bag of nails and a hammer, can you go down to the beach and pin back the tide, stop it from coming in? No. And I was like, but it still seems a bit sketchy. And he said, well, fuck it. Do you believe that I believe? I went, yeah, well, do you know what? You seem happy. He went, well, borrow mine and we'll just fucking get on with it. And that's how I started my journey in recovery. It's not a fact of knowing anything. All I have to do is being willing to believe. And faith is something that I've grown into very slowly. The book talks about seek out religious people and what they have to offer. So I went to the Hare Krishna temple in Watford because I thought that's a bit of banter. You know, they give you a free lunch. You get to wear no shoes and socks. You can mooch about in them I don't even know what trousers they are, like Birkin. Nikki's laughing. You know, these big wide trousers, patting the cows, all of that stuff. But it's not for me. So I went to the Hindu temple in Neasden, which is about 25 minutes away from where I live. Lovely place, love the architecture. It's not for me. Went to a Roman Catholic church. I did confession for the first time in my life. I spoke to a lovely priest, Father Morris. And I remember saying to him, I find it really cringy when people say, just talk to God. Like, what am I telling him? What am I saying? And he gave me a lovely bit of advice. And he said, why don't you talk to God as if he sat next to you and he's your best friend that knows absolutely everything about you and you're just catching him up on your day. And that for me was the beginning, right? Because then I felt less weird doing prayers. I used to be one of those. I'd like go and hide in the toilet at home, get down on my knees, and fucking as quick as I can, and then I'm back out. But now I take time over my morning and evening routines to do prayer and meditation, because in prayer I'm asking, and in meditation I've got to be humble enough to listen for the answers. So look, there is not one thing about my life that is the same. The woman that hated me, that wouldn't let, I was supervised access visits with my kids. She absolutely detested me. I showed her a year worth of work on myself. And she said the other day that the turning point was I went round to see the kids and she looked down. And I said to her, do you want to talk about it? Just as a friend, you want to talk about it? And she was like, that's when I knew there was fucking change, because you never talked to me about anything. You would stand there and lie to my face. I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk. There's nothing wrong with me. Nothing wrong with me. It was like my favorite little catchphrase. And when I asked her if she's all right and do you need to talk about it, then the access got a little bit more. Today, I'm an active member in my own family. You know, my kids look forward to coming home and me helping them fuck their homework up, because their teachers know when I've helped them, because they're like, you know this. So what happened here? And they're like, oh, Dad, help me. And that's all right today. You know, today I'm all right with myself. You know, I'm an active member of my own family. All of the other materialistic stuff, that always comes back when you stop smashing your life to pieces. But today what I have is peace and contentment. I have faith, not just a belief. I have faith in a power greater than myself today. And as a direct result, I have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I will always endeavor to help as many people as I can when I can. I'm one of them weird ones. I'll never say no, and I will always answer the phone. So if you're online, Ian's going to put my number in the chat. Most of you here have got my number. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster. I want to thank everyone that is in my life today. That's the biggest change. I've got people in my life today, and they fucking know it as well. So if you're new, struggling back from a relapse, welcome. There's a 100% solution on Zoom and in this room tonight. And it starts with just breaking the ice, saying hello, getting a number. Let's have a coffee after the meeting. Yeah, my name's Matthew. Grateful Recovered Addicts. Thanks for letting me share.